Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video we're going to have the top 10 worst dungeons of all time World of Warcraft across every expansion. Don't worry, I'm not just being negative, I will have a top 10 good dungeons as well. Just starting with this. So to do this, obviously this is subjective, this is opinion largely. But to do this, I did put in some work to do it. I went through every single dungeon in the game that's been made, and I made three categories. One is how much fun I had doing the dungeon, very opinion based there. Then I had layout slash design, so like how it feels to go through the dungeon. Is it designed really well? Our boss is kind of designed somewhat well. Very broad category, but I think one that's a little less opinionated. Obviously, everyone's gonna have a different opinion on what makes a layout good, but just in general, less opinionated than how much fun I had in it, right? And then the third category I had was memorable moments. So very memorable things. Like, so the first time a mechanic's introduced, the first time something cool happens in a dungeon. Also, if it's a bad memory, like something is bugged really bad, or something just frankly doesn't work. That's obviously a bad memory to have, or something always gets stuck. That's a bad memory to have. So that would make that score quite low. So those are the categories. I rated them 1 through 5 in each category, then averaged them out and got my rankings. I was a little bit surprised myself from this. Pretty much every expansion, I think almost every expansion is represented here. Although I can see just looking at the list that not everyone is, but at least one in most of them. It looks like BC might be the one that escaped just from looking really quickly, but. Yeah, so I was very surprised by some of these, and sorry if any of these are your favorite dungeons, but we'll go through the reasons why. So let's go ahead and get started here at number 10. Coming in at number 10, we have the Wailing Caverns. Now, don't hate me for this one, because I know this is somewhat loved by certain groups of people, but this would be the equivalent of the Alliance's Dead Mines. And frankly, there is no equivalency to it, because Dead Mines is much better. Wailing Caverns, the first time I ever ran it, I actually did have fun, so I was a little bit biased in that way. The first time I ran it was fun because it felt like I was doing the Horde dungeon. I was getting gear for, I believe it was a rogue at the time. There was some leather piece in there that I really wanted. It might have been Hunter too, because if you remember, Hunters wore leather before they wore mail. It could have been my Hunter as well. But I had both of those were twinks, and I was in there trying to get a specific piece of gear. I can't remember what, but I had a lot of fun in there my very first time, so I was a little bit biased. But I ended up running it a lot after that in my next characters in the future. And the layout of this dungeon is really bad. If you get this dungeon during looking for a group, it can be quite awful. People don't know where to go. The layout is so bad that it actually is what drove it down. I had a decent amount of fun in there. Enough that it wouldn't make the top 10 list just on that. There aren't really any memorable moments in there, but there's nothing terrible either. It's just the layout of Wailing Caverns is very annoying. It seems ultra annoying, frankly. So that's why this one did crack the top 10, but barely. So let's go ahead and move on to number 9. At number 9, we have, coincidentally enough, another Horde dungeon, the Ragefire Chasm. So this is in Orgrimmar, obviously, and this is another one where the first time I ran it, I actually thought it was pretty cool. I'm an Alliance player, I was going to the Horde land, but I couldn't let that completely bias me. This dungeon's actually kind of lame overall. It just doesn't. There's nothing really likable about it. That might seem lame to say, but it's definitely not fun. The layout is fine, I suppose. It's pretty linear, and you just go through it, and it's not that bad. The design is somewhat fine, and I have absolutely zero memorable moments from it, though. My only memorable moment is as an Alliance going there, right? So if I was a Horde player, I would have zero memories there. So unfortunately, that's just the way it is. Now, maybe this was your first ever dungeon, so you would have to rank it higher if you're a Horde player, and I would understand that. That would be like me ranking Dead Mines was my first dungeon. I think most people rate that highly, but yeah, so I totally get that aspect of it, but for me, it cracked it at number 9. Coming in at number 8, I hopefully do not get too killed for having some Pandaria stuff, because I know Pandaria was a beloved expansion, but I have Temple of the Jade Serpent. I absolutely cannot stand this dungeon. I hate the layout of this dungeon. I hate the first boss, the the water boss that you have to kill the ads and then fight the boss as he spins in a circle. I was a melee player, so it made me hate it even more. But I can't stand that. I hate that you have to do that boss, then go to the next boss, which I also don't like. And then that unlocks the door to where you can go to the third and fourth boss. The third and fourth boss are fine, but the layout of this is awful. I didn't have any fun running it. If I ever get this in time walking, I'm just completely mortified. I can't stand it in that aspect as well. So, for me, it matters. When it was live, I didn't like it. Going back and playing it, I don't like it. I don't want to level there. I don't want to do anything in Temple of the Jade Serpent. The complete honest truth is I believe my last 6 were all tied with my scoring system. So Temple could easily have been 10, right? But I gave Will and Caverns and Ragefire Chasm benefit of the doubt because they were from vanilla. So Temple is the worst one that's not vanilla, right? So or whatever. So I could have even put Temple up higher, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I just really don't like Temple of the Jade Serpent. It is what it is. My reasons for it, again, are layout. You have to go back and forth. Anything where you have to go back and forth, where doors are locked everywhere, even though it doesn't make sense that you can't go through them. That's the kind of things that I don't like in dungeons. Coming in at number 7, we have Temple of Cephalus. So this is from the BFA. So this is BFA's contribution to the list. I really, I won't even say hate, but I really did not like this dungeon at all. Again, there is no backtracking. However, I did not like the design of it. The traps were kind of cool the first time I did it, but there's too many times where it just derailed the group. In some ways, they were unnecessarily hard. Just, especially for pugs and stuff like that, and just new players, right? So yes, when you're going through if you're going through with your guild or your group, your main group, and just powering through it, it doesn't have to be that bad. But it can cause a lot of trouble in pugs, a lot of failed keys in there because of pugs as well. So I have a lot of bad memories in Temple, so not much fun. A lot of people failing with the eyeballs, putting the eyeballs in. That's not fun. So so I count that as design as well. So it's fun, design, both way down the list there. Memorable moments, nothing super memorable. That's not bad. So I have memorable moments of people really messing up the eyes and just covering my eyes in my hands and being like, "What is going on here?" And that's not a good memory to have. Coming in at number 6, we have Seat of the Triumvirate. Now, you may not even remember this dungeon, which is why it's in the top 10. It has absolutely no high memories for me whatsoever, although it does have some decent lore stuff in there, which I like the lore. That is literally the only thing that I remember about it, other than, a couple times I've gone back and run it for transmogs and just to get everything from it. But Seat of the Triumvirate, this was the one added in Argus. So you go down from the ship to, I think it's Macquarie. It's the top right one. And this is the dungeon that's there. This is a Void dungeon. The Corrupted Naru, that's kind of the storyline stuff. That's actually important in there with Illyria. But as far as fun, I never had any fun in there. It wasn't a fun dungeon to do. It was like hard, easy kind of boss. It wasn't great on Mythic Keystones at all. And then as far as layout goes, the layout was actually kind of fine. That was, I think, the only thing that got even passing marks in my scoring. And then again, memorable moments, nothing good. Nobody remembers this dungeon is there, and that's the issue. Coming in at number 5, we have the most modern contribution to the list, and that is Plaguefall from Shadowlands. So Plaguefall is on this list and I'll go through why. So I don't ever have fun in Plaguefall unless I'm with just the highest geared players possible, and you can just completely power through it, and all the little mechanics of the stuff, like the plague boars that blow up. There's a lot of slime interactions, a lot of mechanics that you really have to know, which is good. That makes it fun in some ways, but it also can make it really awful when it's just like seems like overkill. So I don't ever have fun in there, really. It's the most fun of Plaguefall when you're leveling is that you can skip the first 2 bosses, which is never good to say about a dungeon. You don't want that to be your crowning glory. And then as far as layout, the layout isn't too bad. Again, I think it's a lot of unnecessary slime stuff. Again, you can't stealth through everything because of slime. Which is fine. That's the whole point of the dungeon, right? So it's not like it got all, it's number 5, but it was tied with all these other ones before it. So I just had to make judgment calls based on that. And then as far as memorable moments, there's nothing really memorable or cool about the dungeon and their bosses and stuff. First boss, very standard. Second boss, again, pretty standard. He jumps around. I mean, that's about it. Third boss, nothing special. And fourth boss, definitely nothing special. So it's not that much of a special boss. Very low on memorable moments. I think this will be a very forgetful dungeon. Maybe the best thing about it is that it had the slime serpent in it, but I can't really give it credit for that, for having a mount tied to it. Coming in at number 4, again, hopefully, the Mists of Pandaria lovers don't come after me here, but we have Shadowpan Monastery, the second Mist dungeon on here. This is totally encapsulated. My experience in here was totally encapsulated by me trying to go back and get footage for it. This is actually, I barely got anything because the first boss bugged out. And this is just kind of is perfect. I thought about just resetting the instance and running it again to get more footage for it. But I'm like, no, this perfectly encapsulates this dungeon. This dungeon, every time I go in there, especially post when it was live. When it was live, it was what it was. It's extremely unmemorable, not that fun. Some people would mess up the mechanics where you had to like step into the circle to do something to kill an ad, or you had to kill something so the ads could die, something like that later on in the dungeon. People would mess that up all the time. That's fine. But post that, so if you get this in time walking or leveling, something's going to mess up, something's going to bug. This place is awful. This is not a good dungeon whatsoever. People are going to pull too much because you can mount up at one point. This is just not a good dungeon at all. It was by far, to me, the worst dungeon in Mists of Pandaria. Even though I really didn't like Temple either of Jade Serpent, this one was clearly worse than that for me. Coming in at number 3, I definitely was surprised to have a classic vanilla dungeon this low, I guess, on the list in this case, and that's Mardon. So Mara, it's good in theory. It's very long, so it's kind of like, and I'm taking it. I have vanilla experience with this as well. So it's very long, like so it's BRD is really long, but it's very fun and very well made, and lots of hidden secrets and stuff like this. This is just really big dungeon, and it's actually quite a beautiful dungeon, frankly. But I did not go on that because a lot of the newer dungeons have very, very, very good art, and that would artificially inflate them. So I did not go on artwork or anything like that. Mardon is very nice looking dungeon. Nothing against it there, but it's just unnecessarily long. You're just running for long stretches of time without any mobs or anything like that, and you can't mount or anything in there. It's a very unlikable dungeon. So for layout and stuff, I gave it bad marks for that because it's just a lot of running without fighting anything. And then I never have fun in there, frankly. As an alliance in the old days, it's just not fun to go to Cephalus. In my personal experience, and then post that, people don't know where to go. People get lost all the time in there. They don't even know that you can continue doing the dungeon. Like if you just queue into the front part of it, they don't know you can keep going. That's frustrating in its own right. And so because of all those things, and then to top it off, there's nothing super memorable about it. The only thing like memorable about it is you have to jump down into the water to fight the crocodile boss. And that's something, and that's probably why I probably would have given that. If I look back at my notes, I'd probably give that a 2 instead of a 1 for memorable. But yeah, nothing memorable at all about Mardon. Coming in at number 2, we have our Wrath of the Lich King dungeon, Halls of Stone. So I actually really like Halls of Lightning, but Halls of Stone not so much. So if you've been paying attention to my reasoning so far, you'll probably understand why. As far as fun, I don't think it's fun to backtrack a lot, and this is what you do in this dungeon. You kill a boss, you backtrack. You kill a maiden, you backtrack. You go to Bran, do his event, backtrack. Not fun at all to do that. I do not like escort quests in my dungeons. I just do not, and we'll get to that in my number 1. So you'll see, there's at least consistency in my list here. I do not like escorting Bran. I thought those enraged mobs when they just came out were just way too strong. They would one-shot people all the time. The actual event, I mean, if you go back through now, it was annoying when you're protecting Bran on the computer. It was annoying when it was live, when it was new, but it's so annoying now if you're leveling or something like that. It is terrible. So it's not fun. It's not memorable. There's absolutely no great bosses. Maiden's a decent boss, the Maiden in there. But there's absolutely nothing super memorable about it. So it just plummeted all the way to number 2. And the number one worst dungeon of all time is Hour of Twilight. This dungeon stinks. The entire thing is an escort quest to escort Thrall around. It is terrible. You have to constantly talk to him. During when this was live, someone would be talking to him and doing it for the group, so you just think nothing of it. Okay, this, Fred has it, just a random name. Fred's talking to Thrall, he has it. Well, then there's a random time where you just have to talk to him, where he forgets to talk to him, and then you have to go all the way back and get Thrall. It is so bad. There's only 3 bosses, and it takes so long to do this dungeon. A 3-boss dungeon should be incredibly fast. It should be like Mists of Turn Sith, where it's super fast. It's only 3 bosses, and that's even with a maze, right? I guess you have to do the maze and miss, but like a 3-boss dungeon should be fast and straightforward. It should not have an escort quest in it, or not even a quest. Just you're escorting something the entire time. The end boss is Ejirk, or not Ejirk the Pure. It's the Archbishop that's corrupted or whatever. It's like so just anticlimactic. It's not cool at all. There's none of the bosses are cool at all. It's not fun because someone's gonna mess up the escort thing, or you'll have to take it upon yourself. Then you're just doing an escort the whole time, and it's just not great. It's going back in there. I just was mad that I was even in the dungeon. It was such a bad dungeon. I don't even know what the point of it was. There's no lore really tied to it. Yes, they are like maybe introducing the horde more to the corrupted bishop guy, but I don't know. It was an absolutely terrible dungeon, and that is by far the worst one. This was from Cataclysm. So if you look back, we have classic, Miss, BFA, Legion, Shadowlands, back to Miss, classic, Kata, and then Kata, or not Kata, but Wrath, and then Cataclysm. So almost everything represented. I think BC was the one that escaped there from having anything quite on this list. What I found in BC actually was a lot of the dungeons were just very average, and so nothing too great, but nothing too bottom. As I said, I will be doing a top 10 as well based on the same scoring system that I used on this, and then I think I'm going to do a ranking the expansions by how good their dungeons are, so averaging out the entire expansion's worth of dungeons. So that could be cool as well. As always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel because it helps me out so much. And other than that, everybody, have a good one.